Everyone. Thank you for tuning in. My name is Tara Chklovski, and I'm the founder and CEO of Technovation. It's the largest tech accelerator for children, especially girls. We've been running for almost 20 years and across 120 countries. And girls ages 8 to 18 find problems in their communities. They work in teams supported by a mentor. Many times the mentors are parents, and they find a problem in their community and they build either a mobile app or an AI solution and really learn about how to launch it with people as a business. And at the end of it, like an accelerator, they have to pitch their ideas to a panel of judges. And many times, because it's a global competition, they progress to different levels. And yesterday, we announced the finalists for this season. We had almost 33,000 girls participate, and I'm so proud to introduce Rachel, and we'll be having a conversation together. Rachel is one of our alumna, so welcome, Rachel.
Thank you. Yes, I was a Technovation participant in high school, and I remember the pitch, and we had a wonderful mentor. The whole accelerator program was so much fun, and I was really excited to come back and get involved with Technovation at this event. Also, not just for alumni reasons, but because currently I do workforce upskilling in Google Cloud. So focusing on skills, life skills, tech skills, it's a very, very top of mind issue. So super excited to be here. Super excited to have this conversation with you, Tara.
Thank you, Rachel. And I think the big question is, when you have AI really changing a lot of the workforce tasks that we had initially thought were kind of the white collar, very prestigious roles, like research and writing and analysis. And I I think we have been, as Technovation, really thinking hard about what is important to teach and learn when technology is encroaching on all of these things that we thought were only going to be done by humans, even creativity, right? Like even creating art and music um, and so I think a core part of it has been sort of the human skills of resilience and grit, the things that define an entrepreneur. And so I'm kind of curious, um, what was your Technovation journey? What did you work on, and what have you taken away from that experience?
I was reflecting on the accelerator program, and the thing that stood out to me the most was the mentorship and the team support that was so strong. That has stayed with me throughout the years. It was a while ago, so the actual idea, I actually don't remember. But what I find is so fascinating is the feeling of being in the program and the feeling of being innovative. That has stuck. And I believe that feeling, the feeling of having a team, of having strong support from a mentor, a feeling of, okay, I may not know where this is going to lead, or I don't really know how to do this or accomplish it, but we'll get there. We'll just learn along the way. And the feeling of being innovative, right? Finding a problem in the community and having it be meaningful rather than just another contrived class assignment. That made a huge difference. So when I look back on it, I do think it was a very unique program because it was so different from a classroom in which I felt Technovation gave me a feeling of self-efficacy. And that has stayed with me throughout the years. And that has led to other internships in engineering. That has led to, eventually I got my bachelor's in computer science and ended up working in Google. That self-efficacy has stayed with launching products at Google and now in workforce development. There's all these new upcoming challenges, and I think you may be alluding to this with talking about resilience when it comes to solving unforeseen challenges or upcoming problems. Having that feeling of self-efficacy and identifying as almost like an innovator, right? That's so important. So I'm actually really curious, how do you define resilience? How do you see emotional resilience as well?
Yeah, and I think that's one of the key skills that we are focusing on now, and we spent the almost the past 6 months bringing experts from all around the world, trying to figure out what are the skills that are important to teach and learn. And um, we came up with a slide and a pyramid of skills, and you'll see resilience is right at the top. And so, if our tech person, yes, thank you. So this is sort of our based on our own experience working with almost 500,000 students around the world and kind of seeing the long-term impact of the program model on their identity today. So the assumption is that technology is really key to helping people make a huge impact. And so a problem solving mindset is right at the bottom. But as you said, you even before problem solving, you need to have that attitude of self-efficacy, which means I can do this. I am able to solve this. And so when you have that agency, that's when you're going to start being resourceful and innovative. And so the very baseline is these are skills that we are anticipating in an age of AI where as you'll see, the information processing and synthesis is a very key element of it because we are drowning in information and access to knowledge. Learning how to think critically, learning how to analyze whether this information is real or not, understanding complex systems. And very, very important, I think, is empathy. The reason why Technovation has a huge impact on students is that they are challenged to find a problem in their community. So they're challenged to find something that is bigger than themselves. And you have to spend some time thinking about the other person's problem. And that's very motivating. But that's also something that you have to teach yourself. Um, and then keeping in mind that AI really increases productivity. So you can really rapidly prototype ideas and solutions that you could not have done. So we've seen that in the Technovation's 3-month experience, now teams can create 1 or 2 or 3 prototypes in the same time as earlier they would only be able to do 1. And so this high volume of work and information processing burdens the mind cognitively. And so resilience is so important here, where it's like building a muscle. Like you have to progressively load your muscle to get stronger. And I think the key muscle to build over here is that of innovation and entrepreneurship, where it's not just about essay writing or research. It's not about doing a science fair poster and having an idea about this is what I would do, but it's actually going and doing that thing. And so that's why I sort of have this. The third layer is accelerated execution, where even children can actually execute on ideas and put them into the real world because that's how powerful the tools are. And what that requires us to, especially as parents, especially as educators, is to really reinforce this mindset of lifelong learning because the tools are changing so fast that the education system cannot keep up. And so you have to have that mindset. You want to teach children to be curious and to continue teaching and learning. And then most importantly, build this emotional resilience, which the way it looks like is like you're going to have to face a lot of uncertainty. And the key thing will be you'll be okay as long as you are curious and you keep learning and you keep changing. But these are things that are not easy, and school doesn't typically teach that. And so that's why it's really important for the education sector to be aware and alert and adapt. I'm curious, Rachel, like what are your thoughts? Because you're thinking about similar things. So what are your thoughts? What's missing? What resonates in this pyramid for you?
What resonates is definitely the aspect of how current traditional schools, I went to public school, they may not be prepared for the age of generative AI and what it's doing to the classrooms already. then when we think about the current workforce, we think about what are the skills that are most important for the future and currently. And I would argue a lot of these are still skill gaps. And it's a struggle to teach kids through traditional methods. It's also a struggle to teach adults and employees without giving them ample time and the support structures. So we're struggling with very similar things. And I think we're asking the same questions, even though one is thinking about kids and education and K through 12, higher ed versus workforce. So it's a really fascinating topic. We do have a question, and it's very topical, so I hope you don't mind me bringing up. Someone from the audience says, resilience is a buzzword in education nowadays, but what does it actually mean? And how does Technovation, or how can an educator teach children to be resilient, both as an educator or maybe as a parent?
Yeah, that's a great question, right? I think the way we define resilience is the ability to stick in the game, right? And to not give up, right? So I think the difference between persistence and resilience is that I think of resilience as almost like a young bamboo shoot, right? Like it's very flexible. You push it down, it comes back up, right? And it continues growing. And I think the Technovation experience is an important part of that, where it really is like an entrepreneur really has to be resilient to drive a business to success, right? That's why the world has such few entrepreneurs, because it's very hard. You face rejection at every step of the way, but you keep going forward. And the key things that you have to deal with is tons of rejection. You're doing something new, so you don't know if it's going to work. So you by definition are working with a lot of uncertainty, and so that means you have to have confidence in yourself. And where does that confidence come from? I think it comes from like your support system. So when you were saying working in a team, working with mentors, that's the feeling that you really remember. The human support network is key here to your resilience. And in an age where everybody is saying, oh, you talk to your AI chatbot because it's going to give you personalized support, I think the human network is very, very, very important. And that's something that Technovation is really focusing on, because we've been spending the past 20 years building this global network of people who care about innovation and solving big problems. So I think that they are research-based elements of what it takes to build self-efficacy, and it is things like role models, people who look like you, who have done hard things. So having them in your sort of data bank, right? Um, Having a connection to different mentors, peers, especially parents. Parents are always like your biggest cheerleaders. Um, and then, of course, like the learning experience itself has to be like a safe sandbox where you're building your muscle. And I just highly recommend children to go through the Technovation experience. The curriculum is completely free. Anybody can go onto the Technovation website and go through this 3-month accelerator program. And that, I think, it's amazing for adults too, because how often do you learn how to build an AI startup, right? And so in a very safe environment, there's no negative consequences. And I think that's how you begin to build that muscle of resilience.
I love that answer. And what definitely resonates is how you mentioned sometimes resilience, a big piece of it comes from support systems, right? And so I imagine as a parent, just by being there, being supportive, you are helping build that resilience in a child or a student or a learner as an educator. And reflecting on my own educational experiences right now, I have to say the support systems I have been leaning on because I've been also pursuing an MBA at Stanford at the same time as working full time. That has been really key. I didn't realize that it was necessarily that practice of building resilience that I've been going through for the past year, doing both. But I do think there are elements of each of the components of resilience that you've mentioned, right? Uncertainty of whether things are going to work out, the support systems, getting rejected a lot, which I am very good at, having role models. I think you mentioned having a safe sandbox, right? Sometimes the classroom environment really is great because, sure, you may have the wrong answer. You may raise your hand or say something wrong, but I do think, regardless of whether it's Technovation or classroom program, just the mere, I think, environment of a learning environment implies that it's a safe sandbox, whereas we don't often see that in work, right? In work, you're expected to be productive. If you make a mistake, sometimes there is a culture that's very antithetical to encouraging more failure, more experimentation. So in some ways, I do think children are, if there is the right setup and the right kind of programs, building resilience is definitely a huge piece of it. And I actually do want to ask you, as a follow-up to that, what components of Technovation do you think are powerful that help it succeed in helping kids build resilience or these future skills more so than maybe traditional classrooms?
I think this the our model is based on Bandura's self-efficacy theory, and self-efficacy theory is really just like behavior change as well, right? Like behavior change is very difficult, and there are four elements. I call it the four E's to self-efficacy, and we kind of talked a little bit about it. But the first E is exposure. So exposure to role models. Um, the second one is sort of, I call it the experience, or how do you set up the learning environment and like the safe sandbox. So the curriculum is exactly that, where it's very easy to get started. You don't need any prior background. And like a video game, you get quick sort of positive feedback because you go out into a community and you ask people what problems they're facing, and it's very, very motivating to try to help someone. And then the third E is that of expectations, where a parent or a mentor, you want to have high expectations of children, and children will always rise to those high expectations. When you read books about famous people and their autobiographies, you'll see they'll mention, oh, my mom was very supportive of my idea when nobody else was, right? Like, so you just need one person to believe in you. And then the last E is that of energy. We always kind of forget that we are physical beings. And if you want to learn something, it's the best. You cannot be hungry, you cannot be tired, because then you're less inclined to try risky things, to try innovative things. And so the Technovation model has these four E's built in, and any organization can do that. But our curriculum, again, is like free, so you can access it. And the most important thing we learned was that don't ask children to do things that they're interested in, because when children will do, like, interest is a function of social stereotypes, cultural norms. And so if you want children to be innovative, you want them to think beyond those cultural norms. That is especially relevant to girls. And so what we learned was that shift that interest from yourself to the outside world, and the outside world is so rich that it will open new doors and new horizons for you. Even adults don't know what they're interested in, And so those were sort of the key insights that have helped Technovation have that long-term impact that's so important.
Got it. Thank you. And we do have another question from the audience that I'm going to modify slightly. I did mention I went to public school, so the question here is that because I went to public school but was still able to participate in the Technovation Accelerator, do I feel I received necessary skills and knowledge from the public school, or maybe attended additional clubs? What helped to get to where I am today? I want to ask the exact same thing of you, Tara. Did you feel you received the necessary skills and knowledge from your education? Remember you were in a PhD program and eventually ended up pursuing your iridescent Technovation. What helped, right? What was beyond the classroom that you felt was helpful to get to where you are today, leading Technovation? And I would love for you to answer this first.
That's a great question. I think I grew up in India, and I went to in India. Most children actually go to private schools. So I went to a private school, and it was an all-girls school. And the Indian education system is very deeply influenced by the Russian education system, actually. But it is very much, it doesn't support critical thinking, and it doesn't support innovation. But what it does support is discipline and rigor, and builds a very, very strong work ethic. And so I think those were things that I really appreciated. Actually, I didn't appreciate it so much, but I do now, right? And then I think I owe most of my character traits that have helped me be an entrepreneur to my parents, and so that's why a parent's role is so key. In the U.S., there was a very big study done many years ago, and they followed almost, I would say, I forget, like somewhere in the thousands of students over multiple years, looking at from different socioeconomic backgrounds, different communities, cultures, looking at what was the most important factor that defined student success. And they found it was not teachers, it was not the school, it was the parents. And so that was a very surprising study. It's called the Coleman Report. And I think people are still trying to analyze, because there was so much longitudinal data in there. And that really just, I mean, that's kind of confirmation bias. Like that just resonated with me so much because of my own experience. But I think we spend only 18% of our time in a formal learning environment. So most of our time is actually spent learning outside of school. And that's the reason why clubs and parents play such a huge role in defining who you are and what you want to do. I'm curious, Rachel, like, yeah, what was your experience?
My experience, well, I attended the public schools in the Bay Area. So already there is some level of a STEM focus. There's already the broader context of Silicon Valley and engineering being more top of mind. Parents, I noticed, were extremely supportive, sometimes even, at the point of being overbearing for their kids to succeed in education. So it was a unique environment when I compare it to the broader environment that American public schools usually have. And California itself is very pro-education, pro-technology. I think they recently announced a new funding bill and new policies about K through 12 requiring AI to be taught. So it was a public school. However, I would say the nature in which it operated felt like it had a lot of the advantages of, one, the parental support, the school funding, policies that promoted STEM. Finally, are the one thing I remember so vividly is in high school, our STEM teachers would get very, very preferential treatment, and that even boils down to the classrooms in which they were teaching in. And we had history teachers teaching in like the outskirts of the campus in mobile trailer parks because they were renovating some areas. Math and the science teachers were given the premium classroom. So that already gives like some picture of the imbalance and the focus on computer science and STEM that I was very lucky to receive. We do have a third question. I love this question. So this one asks, how can parents help shape this entrepreneurial mindset and resilience? If I don't know anything about education, where would you recommend to start? Any books or podcasts?
I think being a parent myself, I have two daughters. One is 15, one is 13, and I just think that I love the question firstly, and I love where the person is going immediately towards books and podcasts. And I think that's exactly how I approach things as well. Like, how lucky are we to live in a world where you have access to so many books, right? Like where you can immediately, um, I don't know, find a book about any subject. So I think the first thing I would say is to model courage. And I think, as I mentioned, the Technovation curriculum is completely open. What I did, I started doing the Technovation program with my younger daughter, when she was 7, and she built her first mobile app when she was 7, and I think I didn't know how to code, but you just say, I don't know, let's find out, and you can search anything online, and so I do have a book list. Let me try to see if I can share the. I'll try to find it, but I'm curious, Rachel, if you have any thoughts. While I try to find this one.
Well, related to the entrepreneurial mindset, I do really enjoy the Capital Isn't podcast on Spotify. There's a bunch of great books on, I think, just the philosophy of what life is about that has turned out to be a little bit more entrepreneurial than expected, such as Flow, which talks about adding complexity to life and how a lot of the previous philosophies really served people in a time where they weren't living in a digital age. So that book, I would say, has had a profound impact on the way I think about dealing with uncertainty, complexity, in this new digital age, moving from the industrial age. And Tara, I think I see you sharing the book list, which audience members will be able to see in the comments on YouTube in a second. Well, I want to ask a follow-up. You mentioned your daughter coded her first app at 7. I'm just curious, what was the app? What was she building?
I think the first one was with her team. They actually wanted to figure out what are some easy ways in which they could find problems to work on, and so it was an app surfacing different problems from around the world that could match to their interest. Because it is not easy to find something that resonates with you, your skills, and yeah, I have 2 daughters, so and then the second one, the younger one, created an app, I think, on how to build rockets. So because that's what we were working on. So
That's awesome.
yeah, they've built so many apps. Like I think another one was how to plant trees. I think another one was during COVID, where it was to recycle plastic from water, to clean water bodies. So yeah, different ones. It's less about the idea, like you were saying, and it's more about the process, right? And like working with your friend, and getting to this finish line.
Yeah, for sure. But I also realized that question that we have been answering is itself almost a great framing of a potential challenge in the community to solve, right? It's if parents want to build this entrepreneurial mindset and resilience in children, but want to get more resources and access to learn about how to do this, because it's not often seen in the classroom, right? Especially the traditional method of lecture and homework. That itself could be a cool app to build or a cool solution to try to go out and solve. Well, speaking.
Yes, sorry, I was a little distracted because I was trying to find that resource, but I think the books, in some sense, right, like give you the courage to get started, because it takes away a little of that edge from that uncertainty, right? Because you have a book, it's giving you a roadmap. But that is the very first step to building resilience. And I think role modeling it for your child, that I don't know, let's go find out, let's do it. I think there's the most efficient way to do it is to actually do it, right? And so I've spent so much time reading books on creativity, and and really entrepreneurship as well. And everybody has a different point of view, but the best learning you actually get is by doing it yourself. And so that's why going through the Technovation experience is one of the most effective ways to do that. And for adults, it is a very powerful experience because, and I'm going to put the link into the chat here, because, like I said, how many people have built a startup, especially an AI startup? So.
I do want to dive into this a tiny bit deeper. You mentioned for adults, it's rewarding to go do it, right? And I assume you're talking about being a mentor in Technovation. I'm curious what kind of benefits you've seen mentors gain and why they call it such a rewarding experience.
I think the I don't know if you know about this accelerator. It's one of the most famous accelerators in the world. It's called Y Combinator, and the first woman to join Y Combinator, she was a Technovation mentor, and she said that she got the courage to even apply after she mentored a Technovation team, and I think that's exactly it, right? Because when you're looking at it online, it feels so much scarier and bigger than it really is. And when you go through it, you realize, oh, there's not that much to it. I can do it. And it is such a safe sandbox for an adult to actually go through launching a startup. But you are mentoring a team of students. Your role is that of a cheerleader. Your role is that of a project manager. You can do it. And you can, and there's no negative element, right? Because if you don't know it, just search it up online, and there's always an answer. So especially now in the when you have so many AI tools, um, it can actually, it's even easier to go through all of the stages of brainstorming and even debugging code, even coding itself, because these AI models can do that. So I think number one, I think for mentors, it is that it unlocks that entrepreneurial spirit in them. It demystifies AI for sure. Um, and then, of course, it's one of the most rewarding experiences to help young people find themselves and find purpose. And so combined, it's a very, very strong, it takes a lot of time, but it's one of the best ways in which you can invest this time, because otherwise you're just watching stupid things on social media.
That's a great answer. And I do have to say the focus on the kids' learning journey, definitely important. There's also an adult's learning journey, the parents' learning journey or the mentor's learning journey. It's parallel to the business leader's learning journey on how do I shape an entrepreneurial mindset for my workforce? How do I build my workforce's resilience? Everyone is on this kind of same learning path, right? I personally wonder if we have many answers to this space, especially now that we're thinking about AI. That's not really a question; it's just more of a comment on how this is a widespread challenge, and it's a global challenge. And yes, the focus is on kids, and I think it's also equally important to remember that as a parent and as an educator or mentor, we also have a responsibility to upskill and continue learning ourselves.
Yeah, and I think that's something that we're working on very hard, because we see it's a very core part of the Technovation model is the adult co-learning experience. And so we are repackaging the Technovation mentor experience as an upskilling experience for employees in the workforce, because it's not enough. Like, I think one of the most popular courses online right now is prompt engineering, and I think that is aiming too low, because the tools are changing faster than the courses can be developed. And what you really need to go for is that lifelong learning mindset, because otherwise you'll always be trying to keep up with the tools and not really helping adults sort of. Now, we've not been taught in school, especially our generation, to keep learning. You were supposed to just have one or two jobs, and you slowly progress on in the hierarchical sort of order of things. But it's completely different now, right? I have 35 people in my organization, and the way we are hiring now is completely different. And I'm not hiring for some roles because AI has replaced some of those roles, but people's jobs are changing. And I didn't think that I would get to see this in my lifetime, but yeah, things are changing really dramatically. So, so I would say like that comfort with uncertainty, and that's exactly the journey of an entrepreneur. And the Technovation curriculum sort of packages it in a nice way.
So not only is Technovation helping children have that entrepreneurial mindset, build the resilience, it's also helping the parents and adults in the community as well build that and continue upskilling in the workforce, which is amazing. Well, I do want to ask about something you mentioned earlier, which is it's not necessarily always about the ideas, of course, it's like the camaraderie, but I am wondering, have there been apps and challenges teams have set out to solve that have surprised you, or that you thought were great examples of problem solving and innovation in the Technovation pitches?
Yeah, I mean, every year we get so many incredible apps. I think, I think the thing that sort of surprises me is the courage young girls have. Um, I think women are traditionally um, marginalized in most communities in the world. I think there are about 150 countries that legally discriminate against women, and in many countries, women don't have like basic safety rights. And in some of these countries, like it's just so mind blowing to me that girls as young as 8 are creating apps that just take so much courage for them to stand up against powerful figures in their family, and the kind of agency that it requires to think of that is very very inspiring. So I think that's one. So what I learned was never underestimate a young girl, and don't underestimate what children are capable of doing just because they're children, because they are unafraid to experiment. The kinds of things that they'll do with emerging technologies kind of blows your mind, because the adults have so much baggage that they are not playing with technologies in the same way as as young people are. And it's known like girls develop language abilities faster than boys, and it is very clear like uh, I think in many, there's actually research showing that teenage girls are some of the earliest adopters of technology. And so it is very, very interesting to see how Technovation girls use AI um, and mobile technology to tackle some very big problems. Um, I think one app stood out to me. I mean, so many over the years, but one team was interesting because it was a team from India, and two girls were in an orphanage, and the third team member was a girl in close by, but of course she was from a wealthy family, and she wanted to help girls from an orphanage. So she went to this orphanage, and they formed a team together. And the app they created was to help social workers become more accountable, because there's a lot of corruption, and social workers were not um, they would kind of drop orphans or student or children um, regularly. There was no sort of trail of who they were supporting, and then when the social worker would leave, the child would lose all her data. So there was no documentation and no sort of long record. So they made a digital platform and a mobile app that could, and they called it Baton, so that the records could be handed from one social worker to another. And that to me was just such an example of empathy, innovation, resilience, And that app actually made it to the finals, which is very difficult to do in Technovation because it's such a competitive program. And the girls could not come to the US because they did not have their birth certificates. So they did not have a passport. They couldn't get a visa. But I mean, kind of, yeah. That's fun
What a
story.
what a complex app and pitch, and what a beautiful story, though. Wow, I feel like there's so much to be inspired by just looking at the ideas and the pitches that come from Technovation. We do have another question from the audience here about the A part of STEAM. How do you approach art at Technovation? And is there a place for artists in the future filled with the quote unquote scary AI and technologies?
Yeah, so actually we don't prescribe like any kind of problem. We just say find a problem in your community, right? So and it can be any problem. And a small percentage, not a large, a small percentage of girls do create apps and solutions around creativity. And so one of the apps a couple of years ago was to help young children um, learn how to write poems and to encourage them to write poems. Um, I think we periodically get apps that help you learn a new instrument using AI to learn a new instrument. And we haven't had that many apps around I guess visual art because it's a little harder to do that as someone who's new to coding. Um, I think um, I think so. I also paint myself, and one of my favorite painters is David Hockney, and I love him because of how brave he is. He was one of the first people to start using the iPhone to paint, and it unlocked like a whole another level and type of painting for him. And I was just so impressed because I'm a kind of a novice painter and kind of scared, and you think you have these rules, and guess what? There are no rules, right? And and so I've been following this space a little bit, and um, I attended an event a few weeks ago. If some of you, there was the in the U.S. There's the Tribeca Film Festival a few weeks ago in New York, and one of the short films that was released is very interesting. It's by OpenAI and using the Sora video platform, and you can see the story on LinkedIn. The producer had said that there was no way that they could have created this short film without AI, and the reason is that the the film is about this. It's a true story about this guy who used to um, sleep talk, and in his sleep he would tell stories, and so he recorded these stories, and he has like 30 hours of these audio recordings of these stories. And so the AI took these stories and made them into a film. And the film that I saw, it's a short film. It is so interesting. It's a film of four of these friends. His friends are sitting around a table reading newspapers, and the newspapers suck these people in. And now these people are running through different news articles over the years, and trying to find each other and talk to one another. And the producer was saying, like, AI has unlocked a level of creativity that was inaccessible to them before. And in a specific to film, he was saying that filmmakers used to be so scared of editing and iterating because it's so costly. But now it's so much like that burden is lifted. And so you can actually, it's changed the way films are produced because it's made them much, much more experimental and innovative. So I think there are the usual fears of like, oh, it's going to take away it's going to encroach on it. But it's about confidence, right? New horizons are going to open up. So
For sure, for sure. I think it also speaks to a very human need to have creative self-expression, and I think, a huge piece of self-actualization, feeling human, feeling connected with others, being able to share this art with folks. And I think, to your point, AI is bringing that barrier down significantly, which is so exciting, right? But there is quite a bit of uncertainty about jobs and skills when we shift the focus back to employment, right, and education. I do want to take a step back and surface another great question, and apologies for not having the space to do this sooner in the talk. This question is, could you tell a little bit about Technovation to those who don't know anything about it? Are all programs of Technovation online? Can people from all over the world participate? Are there requirements, age, language, coding skills?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the curriculum is all online, and the way it works is you register. We're going to open up the season sometime in October. The new season, it runs on a schedule, and so students, girls, can compete. But the curriculum is free, so any educator can use it with girls and boys in their classroom. If you're a parent, you can walk your children through this curriculum online, like if you don't want to compete. And it's open to everybody. I believe it is translated into Russian. The curriculum is translated into 17 languages. I believe it is translated into Russian as well. And it is age appropriate. There are 3 divisions: beginner, junior, and senior, supporting students from ages 8 to 18. And you don't need any prior coding background at all to participate, either as a mentor or as a student. So as I was saying, like, I think it is one of the world's most evidence-based, research-based programs that bring AI entrepreneurship and make it super, super accessible.
Thank you for that. Well, we have maybe 12 minutes left. I do want to make sure folks who have questions get a chance to ask them. So I would love to invite the audience, as I'm speaking, to think of some questions, think about any particular components you may want to focus on, and feel free to submit them. There was a question I realized I missed in the chat a while back, and this question goes: one educator once said that we're teaching kids to be a workforce of 2050 to 2060. What skills do you think at Technovation, or what skills do you at Technovation think are needed in the future? And I think this may be a really great time to focus on, let's say, like short term and then long term.
I think it's a great question. I'm having trouble even just thinking about next year, and I think I think the skills tree that I had, I can try to, maybe we can bring that slide back up. Yeah, I think this skills tree assumes technology is a powerful tool for to use. So that's why computational action is sort of the second layer. Instead of coding, I did not use the word coding. And learning how to frame a problem, learning how to select tools, debugging, and the learning how to work with AI systems are key skills that we could be teaching, as well as entrepreneurship. I think I'm working on a piece. There's an interesting report called Project AI 2027, and it talks about the person had kind of predicted very accurately what ChatGPT would do in 2020, so 2 years before ChatGPT came out. And I don't fully agree with a lot of what they predict, but it is an interesting thought experiment. And I think in 2050 and 2060, I think tools will definitely be very, very powerful, but I feel that the basic problems that the United Nations sort of outlines as no poverty, no hunger, um, health for all, education for all, gender equality, and a stable climate. I think these problems are so complex that corporations and are not incentivized to solve these problems. And so I think that um, AI will result in in increased resources for a lot of people, and we may go to a place such as like universal basic income or something like that. Um, but it'll still mean that some of these bigger problems, social issues, will remain, and that's why I think that complex systems thinking and empathy are going to be so important, because when you have enough money, you're still going to be unhappy if you don't have a sense of purpose. And as human beings, we are geared to relate to one another, and we get our sense of purpose from helping one another. Honestly, otherwise, you feel empty. So, so I think that that's why empathy is also a very core block in that skills of the future. Um, so I think it's a really great question, right? Like, where's the world headed? And you can read Brave New World for a dystopian view of that. But I think as educators, you believe in the best of humans, and I think there's this researcher. His name is Richard Schwartz, and I don't know if it's values. So he has a framework of what are the basic human values. I can put the link in, and it's interesting. I think he studied people across 70 different cultures, and we are so similar to one another, despite our languages, our cultures, our nationalities. And he talks about the 10 different values that we share, and I think it's valuable to think about those. And a sense of purpose is something that we all care about. So
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. I would love to make sure we have time to maybe give like a takeaways or a summary. For you, what do you think are the top maybe 1 to 3 takeaways for parents going forward for helping their kids in STEM and life skills, problem solving skills, and the future?
I think as parents, right? Like, and I'm living this on a daily basis. I think you want your children to be happy and safe, right? And so the balance is, where do you push, where do you support, and it's a little harder when the future is so uncertain, when you cannot really predict what jobs will be open, and the current school systems are not really geared towards preparing for that workforce. So I think parents today have a bit of a harder problem than ever before, because the uncertainty is so high. And your traditional thing of, oh, you need to get into a good college, that will help set you up. I think that I don't know if that is true anymore, to be completely honest. And so I think that the biggest thing I'll say is, as an employer, is I want to see what people have done. And so if you can help your child to actually practice being an entrepreneur, right? And to push for these, to help your child understand who she is, who he is, right? Like your sense of purpose, your identity, like some of these larger problems, right? Um, I think that's, and to be okay with that discomfort of not knowing that the answer to that, because many times, right, like you'll have children who follow what their parents do, but then once they are established in their job, they have a sense of, who am I? I did this because I was following the rigid path, but I'm unhappy now. because I don't know who I am, and why I'm here. And so I think like helping your child grapple with that question and being okay with not knowing that answer, I think that's one of the most important things. And the way you can do that is also by modeling. And so I feel like a broken record, but I think, yeah, the experience of talking to someone outside of yourself, learning to help someone else, and then using technology to have a bigger impact in the world, that's a very um, powerful feeling, to be able to make that change in the world. So I would say, yeah, um,
It's a great way to summarize.
project for a kid. Yeah. So,
Yeah, and just to recap some of the things we discussed about, because we discussed a lot, lots of great data points in there too. I think what I was hearing and what I was learning as well is really for the parents' mindset. You mentioned, when it comes to resilience, there's the uncertainty, the rejection. There's also the support system that's really important to help build resilience for kids. But also parents themselves when it comes to being a role model, right? And helping maybe even upskill themselves as a mentor and joining Technovation to go on their own learning journeys can help and cultivate that lifelong learning mindset that could help demonstrate to any children. And then there was another piece you mentioned, which was expectations. And I think the expectations of certain groups, right? We have the lowest expectations often of children, and maybe sometimes underrepresented communities. Sometimes it's just gender or some other factor that's just not really under our control. I think that closely ties with this entrepreneurial mindset that you've been mentioning. It's not necessarily what is the thing to be done, but what can be done, what should be done about this problem. And then lastly, I do remember there was a really great moment in this conversation talking about art and how AI may lower barriers for art, but it does not always solve the social challenges, right? And so it follows that empathy is a key skill for kids going forward. So I love the chart that you were sharing. I think it's amazing. I know that a lot of expertise went into building it, so it's really amazing to see that. And I'm thinking there should be some way to adapt it for the current workforce as well, not just for kids. But I want to thank you for your time, Tara. I really appreciated you having this conversation with me. Thank you for answering all the questions. It was so great to be able to talk about these with you.
yeah, thank you, Rachel. You did a great job.
Thank you. All right. Thanks.